Does anybody remember how keen we all were in the West to destroy white rule in South Africa and to allow black people to take control of the country? After all, South Africa is possessed of almost unlimited material wealth in the form of raw materials such as diamonds, gold, uranium, all sorts of other useful things just lying in the ground waiting to be dug up. Why should a minority enjoy all the prosperity from those riches? Surely if Nelson Mandela could be freed and a Western-style democracy established, then South Africa would become a shining beacon to show what a black African nation could achieve when it was set free. This, at least, was a story that people in Europe and the United States were fed, and many of them believed it. Of course, some people were a little dubious because they recalled vividly what had happened when Rhodesia was handed over to black rule back in 1980. It led to a hideous dictatorship, a bitter civil war, and the country was reduced to a basket case. Rhodesia, or Zimbabwe as it is now known, is indistinguishable from any other black African nation, that is to say poverty-stricken and corrupt. But with all its resources, surely the same thing could not happen to South Africa if black rule was introduced to the country. Here are a couple of random facts about modern South Africa which viewers may not have come across. They might not have heard about these things because since the release of Nelson Mandela, nobody is keen to talk too much about South Africa unless a much-loved figure like Archbishop Desmond Tutu dies, somebody associated with the struggle for freedom. Here is the first fact. In 2020, 688 9- and 10-year-old girls gave birth in South Africa. If a 9-year-old girl had a baby in Britain or America, it would be front-page news and a scandal of the first magnitude. It is so common in South Africa that nobody even notices. There are roughly the same number of people in South Africa as there are in Britain, say 60 million, give or take a few million. Imagine, if you will, that every year in this country almost 700 children aged 9 and 10 were to have babies. This really isn't something one can readily picture. The general assumption is that this is happening because of financial grants to mothers in the country. In other words, families get their children pregnant for the money. The fact that 46% of people in South Africa are without work, that is to say nearly half the people in the country are either seeking jobs and cannot find them or are not even looking for work. The grant for a new mother can be a vital source of income, even if the new mother is only 9. The dreadful poverty in the country has caused fierce riots and even more seriously is now beginning to destroy the country's infrastructure. Under white rule, a magnificent rail network was built up. This has gradually deteriorated since the end of the apartheid regime. During the lockdowns, though, associated with COVID, it was practically dismantled by those taking advantage of the absence of security guards and other staff. 80% of the country's railway stations have now been completely destroyed. Cables, metal railings, windows, doors and even roofs have been stolen. Walls have been demolished so that bricks might be looted and used to build huts in shanty towns. It is impossible to say whether the railway network will ever recover from these attacks. What about all the wealth from those gold mines and the diamonds and other minerals? Little has found its way into the country as a whole, obviously. One may assume that the same thing has happened in South Africa as in the other black nations of Africa. This involves Swiss bank accounts and greedy and corrupt politicians. The history of sub-Saharan Africa may really be summed up as follows. When Arabs and Berbers from North Africa crossed the Sahara and explored Central Africa, they found people still effectively living in the Stone Age. They then founded Muslim kingdoms in such places as Mali. The picture was pretty much the same when Europeans sailed to West Africa, although there were large towns built of mud, ruled over by dictators who made a fortune from the slave trade. In the 19th century, Europeans taught the Africans to build, to write, to learn, and to do all those useful things which have been of such benefit to Europe and Asia. By the middle of the 20th century, it was thought that the African nations were ready to go it alone. When the white rulers withdrew, a slow descent to barbarism began in most parts of sub-Saharan Africa. It was worse in some places than others. One thinks of the Belgian Congo and Rwanda, but always the trend was inexorably downward. South Africa is simply the latest example of this phenomenon.